Hello and welcome to this video giving you an overview of the Tersus Nuwa software. The Tersus Nuwa software is what we're going to use for any sort of data collection, stakeout, equipment configuration, any of that type of stuff. So real quickly, we're going to just give you an overview. If you notice at the bottom of the screen, you have essentially four main areas of the software. Primarily, first we're going to start off with the project. So in project, you'll notice as we're looking at this screen, our current demo project is what's shown in the upper left corner. That's the name of the project that we have open. And it says we're disconnected. You may have also seen that when I turn on the software, immediately it looks to connect to the last receiver that it was connected to. I canceled out of that, but as you can see, it says disconnected in the upper right-hand corner. If we go into project, this is where we can see a list of our existing projects, or if we want to start a new one, we hit new on the bottom here. If we go into our current project by tapping on the bar across the top, you're going to see it's going to show a lot of the coordinate system information, project information. If I want to edit anything in this, I hit edit in the lower left, and this is where we're coming through, and we can see any of the information about the projection, datum transformation, any sort of height fitting, specify where our geoid model is there. And the last thing on the list there is tap fitting. If you are using our tap correction service, you're going to want to make sure that you have the correct one selected here. In our instance today, we will be using NET83 2011 adjustment. If everything is fine there, we can also come back to the main screen and always get back into our coordinate systems through here. Next thing I want to show you is the code option. So if we have different codes, code lists, anything like that, that's going to be in here. If we decide we want to import something, we have the option here of bringing in a COD, which is a Tersus format, and or the FXL files. If you have an FXL, you can import that in and use that for your code list. Next, if we had any lines or anything we were working on, that's in here. Road corridors, anything we have built or we want imported, we bring that into here. If we look at export, so when I click on the export icon, you have a couple different ways we can export out data. Notice, first of all, you have on the top, you have coordinate export or other export. If I click on other export, just to show you this quickly, these are a lot of your common formats that you may want to get data out in. So your common KML, DXFs, things like that. We can spit this information out in one of those formats. Or if you go into the coordinate version, pick your point type. So these detail points, points you calculated, staked, whatever it might be, export this out. So we'd put in our check mark for what type of point we want to be exporting. Maybe if there's a date range or something like that, we can put that information in, and then we specify the format. Format here, we have a bunch of the common formats that you may see, but you can also click on user defined towards the bottom and create your own format. If you do create your own format, it's a matter of just picking things from one side and then it automatically goes to the selected side. When you're done with that, you give it a name or your custom format name and you're done. And then we specify the file name that you want, if you want headers on, and then you navigate to the storage path where you'd have that. Similar with importing, if you want to bring in information into the job, you can specify you're bringing in points or lines. You do have other sorts of imports to bring data in. Show you a little high-level overview of a couple of them there. Specify your units, where you want those to be stored. Notice your target point says survey point. You can bring these in as control points, stakeout points, or survey points. The other thing we can look at here is, again, we're still in our project button from the bottom, and we go into settings. You're going to see these are a lot of your core sticky settings that are going to be with you throughout this software. Your units, coordinate order, decimals. You'll notice that you have update detection is toggled, and it shows the version that we're currently on. If a new version is published, you will get a notification on the screen, and it'll be a simple one button press to do an update. And then again, we can come into here, project, still in the project button from the bottom, click on point, and you're going to see your points listed out here. These are your survey points will be listed out. You'll notice we can click over here and see our control points or stakeout points. Now, for example, if there's something you want to do, this is a great little tool to know about. It will have a bunch of points listed out here. If we need to select multiple points or get different functions to happen when we select a point, make sure to hit that multi-select button in the upper right over here. That's going to give you more options as far as what you can do with that data and selecting multiple points, maybe to import them in as a staking point. The last thing I'll show you on this screen here, on the top bar you see an icon that's indicating like a picture. This is actually a map. So what that will do then is that'll open up the map screen and show you where all of your points are in that format if you don't want to see in the list view. The last thing in the project that I'll show you is we have cloud setting. So this here is basically where we have our setup. So when you're logged into your cloud system, you'll have the ability to synchronize data back and forth from the office to the field or between controllers seamlessly. One thing to note that you'll see on all of our screens is we have this more with a plus. If I click that, that allows me to add more things to this menu. Like for example, if I wanted to make my surfaces here, I can add that, or I can remove things and take things off there. This gives us a nice way to create like a streamlined view of this software to make less options for people. So that's what happens when you hit that more button right there. Functions that are in the device tab. So first and foremost, upper left corner, you see where it says connect here. This is if you are not connected to a receiver. You're going to see some options here, and then on the bottom you'd be able to hit connect once you specified your receiver and then what the serial number is. One thing to note here is if you ever want to do any training or simulation or anything like that, we can put this in a simulation mode. And the other option, which is sometimes useful when you don't have a receiver and you're just doing some stuff in the field to get close, you can use the internal GPS here and have all the functions in the Nuwa software. In this example, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to just take my controller here and tap it to the side of the receiver. And once I do that, it will automatically do a connection for me. So I don't need to manually look at the serial number or something like that to make that connection. So now if I go into connect, you'll see that it's connected up to my Oscar through Bluetooth. And if I want to disconnect that, hit the button at the bottom. The next thing on this screen that we want to look at, we have base mode and rover mode. So if we look at base, this is essentially different styles or configurations or ways that you can have your equipment set up to do, basically with one click, have it do several functions. In this example, I have a couple default ones on here. Looks like I had one to set up a base for NTRIP base for a drone, or using internal radio with one of my receivers. So when I go into this mode, I can actually just hit start in the lower right, or I can go into detail of something. So if I want to go in, for example, click on one of these and hit detail, this is where we're going to put in our information, maybe our base coordinate, hit that little teardrop shaped, upside down teardrop shape icon and have it grab a current position. Make sure your antenna height is right, internal radio, the mode you're running at, whatever it might be there. So you can set up all that stuff. Otherwise, when we want to start that base or whatever mode we want to do, we hit start in the lower right. If you need to make a new configuration, you hit new in the left. Very similar with the rover, we're going to come in and we're going to have different modes that we can have that. So once you have your connection to their device and then you specify your rover mode, you're going to be able to go into this here. So for example, on this one, maybe you have a CORS network or you want to run radio, you essentially just click on that and you'd hit start. The next one that I want to show you in this screen is TAP. So TAP would be if you're getting a satellite-based correction, PPP service, you do not use a base mode or rover mode. You actually just go into TAP and then you hit start right there. Allow yourself a minute or two to converge, but you should have all of your information there. The next one, if we click on the device icon, device is going to show us all the information about the device that we are connected to currently. as you look through some of these options on here, we have the ability to change some things, turn on tilt, do an IMU calibration. What kind of mode are you running your GPS receiver in? Are you unbalanced, extreme reliability, rapid fix? Basically just getting yourself set up for having this receiver performing how you want it to perform. That's in the device. If there's ever an instance where you want to do a NEMA output or something like that, we can go into there. Next, we have the survey. So survey is where we're going to get into a little bit more of the details part of things. So in survey, this is giving us some options now to essentially be able to do point stakeout line, maybe some calibrations, some work with some surfaces, put some CAD files in here. And so this is where we're going to do this stuff. The other thing that is noted is if you want to do just a very basic static survey, we can come into static survey here. You simply specify your interval that you want to store this data at, how long you want it to be collecting that data, and you hit start. That's all you need to do to start a static survey. You're going to configure this stuff and hit start. Next, I want to show you the survey button. When we click survey in the upper left, this is where a core of our data collection will be done. In this example now, you'll see I'm actually set up inside, but it's giving me a good enough position that I can show you around the software a little bit here. Coordinate system may be incorrect, but noticing that across the top, you're going to see how many satellites you have. You're going to see that icon. That next icon over is going to change colors. Once you would start your survey type, when it's fixed or an accuracy indicator is going to be with that next icon over. It'll turn green with tighter crosshairs when it's fixed. You'll see your antenna height. Next, beside that, you'll see where it says the receiver with off, showing that your tilt is not on, and then your battery power. This is your survey screen. In order to capture a point in this screen, do you see that upside down teardrop shaped icon? We would select that and it would go into a mode where we'd start measuring. That's where we'd enter the code and then be able to confirm that information. Right above that is where we do our line work. This line work is extremely easy to use. You do not have to have it coded any certain way or anything. You're essentially going to define what that element is you're capturing and what you want that line work to look like, and it's going to step you through that process. So for example, you want to get a square, it's 2 points. You don't need to shoot all 4 points in some examples. And so some of your arcs and polylines, so it'll step you through that, and you can have things numbered and or coded however you want. Otherwise, if you want to do a traditional numbering of points, that is right under the satellite where it says 15 satellites. You'd have your point number, your code, and if you're doing any line work, you can have your bounce between your different line names. Below line name, 2 buttons down, you'll see this is where we can specify our background map. If we don't want an aerial map, we can just turn it to an online map, or we can say none in some cases. Sometimes that's nicer to see our data, but in this case, I can just leave it on Google Online Map here. And then on the left side of the screen, you have your zoom in, your zoom out. You can also pinch to zoom with 2 fingers, and then below that, your center on icon centering on where you're at. Down below, you'll see you have the option to change any of these 6 tiles below. If I tapped on maybe time, it'll allow me to say, I want to know what my PDOP is at all times. And you can just have that showing up down there. So that is configurable. This is the screen you're going to do most of your traditional data collection in. One thing that's very important to know, there are a lot of settings that you can change in here. And this is all by hitting the config button on the top bar. When I go into config, this is where we're going to get options for changing like your solution. Maybe if you want to loosen some things up so you can get some positions maybe in an area where you normally wouldn't, or maybe you don't have corrections and you just want a differential correction. Whatever it might be, you can set this stuff up. You're specifying your type of point that you're going to shoot. Our definition of a detail point is all of the traditional survey points. If you want to get outside of that, you can get into continuous points, you can shoot control points, and one of the nicer features that's embedded in here is the offset survey mode. So using the tilt of the pole, you can define your azimuth and essentially offset points based off of that when you're using the IMU. Next, you can define if you want to do PPK survey, auto survey for point recording. Do you want it to show your base point? You know, how long of a point or of an occupation do you want with your epochs there? Not normal to increment by 10, but that was a different thing we were doing previously. And some of just your basic settings and your antenna height. So that's all done under your survey config. Notice there's two options for config on the top though. You have common config and you have display config. I've gotten several calls about this where people say, hey, I want to see my stake points in my map screen, or I don't want to. This is as simple as turning things on and off. What do you want to see on that display there? You want your base point there, point name, point code, any line detail, any of that type of stuff, or even your level bubble. This is by going into the display config. I'm going to back out here. That was survey. The next one, these are pretty self-explanatory, just giving you an idea where they're at though. But if you want to have points you want to stake out, lines you want to stake out, do some site calibration, that's in here. Site calibration, pretty straightforward. Essentially, you're going to say, I'm going to add a point to the calibration. Your source coordinate, which you can have it take an occupation in this screen, or you would select it from a list that you have, and then your target coordinate, what you want those coordinates to be. So that is all done here under site calibration. Again, you'll have a little bit more of the config. Some of this stuff has gone through. This is more of like your sticky buttons. If you go into config right there, very similar to where we were at in the config within survey. Road stakeout, surface stakeout, CAD stakeout. One thing I'll show you about CAD stakeout, this is where you're going to be. Sometimes you want that black screen. We can have that black screen background. And this is where we're going to bring in our CAD files. It's going to give us some options in here. You know, exploding lines, what layers do we want to see, those things. And then we're basically working with our DXF files in this particular application. Gives you a little bit more that you can do if you have some line work and stuff in there. And last one on here is visual positioning. This is if you're using the Oscar Trek and you're using the photos from within that GNSS receiver to calculate positions or point clouds. The last one is tools. Tools, just as a high-level overview, this is where we would have some of our COGO and computation tools for areas. A very common one to use is inverse or offsetting some points. Earthwork, if you want to create reports based off of material depth, surface areas, things like that. Maybe some line work, you want to do some segmentation, area division. If there's too much on this screen and you want to stream it down for people, as a reminder, you hit that more button down there and we can take some things off the screen right here. Overall, that's a high-level overview on the Tersus Nuwa software.